only 2 minutes late, but I think we're live now.
Okay.
We can wait for yeah. Well, hi everyone. Welcome to our chat with Dr. Ali Jones from the George Institute for Global Health. We're going to be talking today about health star ratings and kind of front of pack labeling a bit in general, and how the Australian system stacks up and what, and you know, where it came from, and all of those sorts of questions. Let me kind of just start by acknowledging that I'm streaming it today from the lands of the Wurundjeri people down here in Victoria. Pay my respects to Aboriginal elders who are present today, and to introduce Ali Jones, who she's a public health lawyer that leads the Food Policy Division's program on regulatory strategies to prevent diet-related disease. That's a lot of big words. And Ali and I often cross paths in this space around health star ratings and the review process that has gone over, that has happened over the last couple of years. And so we asked her to come and have a chat to us, really in light of the decisions that were made a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago, around fruit juice and the stars as part of the review process. So we'll kick off. Thank you for joining us, Ali.
Thanks, Alice. It's really nice to be here.
Yes. And did I miss anything really important in your bio?
Definitely not. I would also just acknowledge that I'm speaking today from Gadigal land and acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who might be joining today.
Excellent. I can tell all of our viewers that Ali has lots of degrees. And
they don't need to know that. Just know that I'm interested in food policies, that especially those that involve regulation. So whether that's sugar taxes or food labeling or marketing restrictions, those kinds of things are my jam, and I do research in those areas. And I also spend a lot of time advocating with groups like Parents' Voice to improve the public health outcomes from those policies.
Yes, I can tell. So our members, that there's often emails that I send off to Ali when we're looking at submission processes, and I'll say, hey, what are we thinking about this? What's the research showing us? And that really feeds into the questions that we ask our parents and the directions that we put into our submission. So we're always grateful for your advice and expertise in that space. So first question. The first question I had today, is, so for people who don't know, why do we have a front of pack labeling system in Australia?
Good starting point, I think. So we know that people don't really read the nutrition panel on the back of a pack, or some people might look at it, but we know that most people don't. The average shopper doesn't really turn over the pack, and there's all those little numbers there. If you're particularly interested in one thing, like maybe salt, you can use it, but it's not that useful in telling, judging, comparing the healthiness of products next to each other on the shelf. So Australia is one of about 30 countries worldwide now, which has gone down this process of having a front of pack nutrition label. And the idea behind these kinds of labels is that you get this sort of simple, at a glance way to compare the healthiness of products overall. And there's a couple of different approaches being pursued worldwide, and there's no agreement that there's sort of, one best approach. But Australia's one is the health star rating system. It rates foods from 0.5 to 5 stars based on nutritional quality. So 0.5 star is the lowest. Sometimes I wish you could go to 0, but 0.5 star is the lowest, and it goes up to 5. And you're meant to use it to compare similar products on the shelf. So, 2 breakfast cereals, 2 pasta sauces. The one with the higher health star rating should be lower in things like salt, sugar, and fat, and it might have more fiber, protein, and fruit and veg content in it.
Excellent. So I shouldn't be like getting the yogurt and taking it into the pasta sauce aisle and
This has
comparing.
been one of the big sort of learnings I think we've had from the first few years of operation is how consumers do use it to compare. And there's a whole bunch of numbers behind the system and different categories that aren't visible to the shopper. And so you are, yeah, it's true that you're not meant to use it to compare, especially like a liquid product to a solid product.
Yep.
It works best when you compare similar items on the shelf.
Okay, cool. I do know that that is something that people have said to me, and I know myself when I've walked down the confectionery aisle and see some of those with their health stars, and like just the word health star, you kind of, it gives that feeling of that it must be healthy, it's got stars on it. And you see some of those products with 1 or 2 stars and think, but you know, the pasta sauce in the next aisle is getting 3, so this must be okay.
It is hard when you start to make comparisons like that. And I think confectionery, it's one of the categories that did get looked at in the review, and I would expect nearly all confectionery would be between half and 1.5 max, probably under the new system. But yeah, it's why we need the message to compare similar products. It's also confusing, I think, in the confectionery aisle that you're often getting sort of a health star next to a claim like natural.
Yeah.
And how you trade those things off. But we have seen studies from Choice that showed that people think that having half a star, even a health star, looks bad on a product, and that they rate it as less healthy than something with no stars. So hopefully, seeing low star ratings on confectionery in the future
Yeah.
will kind of help emphasize the message.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. So on that, you mentioned that there was a review, and in the new system that confectionery potentially will, some of those stars will change. What is this review that we keep referring to, and what's the deal?
Yeah, good question. And the review, it's been hard to follow because it's meant to be, there was a 2-year version, a 5-year version. But I guess the important point to emphasize is that when we introduced Health Stars back in 2014, the government always said from the beginning, we're going to start it on a voluntary basis and we're going to review it at set points to see how it's performing and decide what to do with it. So this wasn't some big reactionary review. It was always a sort of scheduled check-in on Health Stars, how they were doing. And as part of the 5-year review, which was the main one, which we've now just sort of been wrapping up very slowly, they looked at sort of everyone's feedback. So they looked at, our consumers, do they understand the rating, the way products are scored, does that make sense? And definitely, I think what we saw in the first few years is people picking up on some examples of specific products where it didn't seem to make sense, and then feeding that back and looking at, okay, do we need to tweak the points and how they're allocated? So a lot of time went into looking at that. And then some other things around how many products it was on and whether it was really working in a voluntary form. And so the review looked at all of those things and came up, and it was done by an independent reviewer. So the government paid an independent consultant to get everyone's feedback. And then the government looked at what the report they came up with and issued their own final recommendations. So coming out of that now, what we're going to see is, unfortunately, it stays voluntary. That's something that all of the health and consumer groups have said time and time again, that for this to work properly, we need to see it on everything. And unfortunately, because of industry resistance to that, the government has still said, oh, we'll give them a bit longer for it to be voluntary and we'll check in another 5 years. But, we will continue to maintain pressure for all companies to put it on all products, because I think that is the main area that's letting down Health Stars right now. And then the other thing that sort of is of interest to people coming out of the review, I think, is that some products are going to change scores. And it should be emphasized that it's quite a small number of products, so you might not even notice it. You might notice it with some high-profile ones like Nutri-Grain should go down. It got 4. That was one of the main problem products that was highlighted in the review.
The anomalies.
It was an anomaly. It's because it's got so much fake protein in it that protein can offset the sugar and salt that it has in it. But it should be going down unless they change to cut out more of the sugar and salt. So I'll be very interested to see what Kellogg's response is. But basically, about 20% of products could change score. Most of them, it'll only be half a star up or down, and they've got 2 years for the rollout. So you might see new things on the shelf with a change score, but it's probably even quite likely you won't notice. They've got 2 years to do that because it's sort of fairness in when they update their packages, they can incorporate it in the next round.
Yeah, which completely ignores that a lot of them do time-based promotions on their cartons and change them multiple times a year. But you know,
absolutely, but they always say that they can't change the label quickly, but when they want to,
they
do.
really can. And is the implementation? I've lost track a little bit of that that issue with the, you know, the as prepared stuff. So that was what was termed the kind of the Milo star, the Milo loophole, which was Milo putting on the star based on preparing it with a glass of milk instead of just, you know, the product itself.
Skim milk as well, Alice. Skim milk.
Yeah, skim milk.
So
yeah.
they were definitely going
like
for their
one
best.
tiny teaspoon or whatever it was.
There was 3 flat teaspoons in a cup of skim milk. So they were basically getting the score of skim milk, which was definitely seen as not fair. And that rule was sort of the fix to that rule was incorporated into the review. So those products where they were getting a benefit of like milk or vegetables and stuff, but they really just are a sugar powder, they have to go back to scoring just based on what's in their package.
Yeah.
So I think for Milo it'd be 1.5. The trouble with a voluntary system is that they could just choose to take off the score, which is what they've done for the past couple of years. They just took off the 4.5, and they might choose not to put the true health star on, which, you know, we don't think that's good for consumers. Yeah.
No, definitely isn't. Yeah. Well, and this is why we're all working together to kind of maintain that pressure to make it a mandatory system so that consumers get a fairer look at what the health, you know, the comparative healthiness of packaged foods. In fact, Ali and I were talking beforehand, neither of us nutritionists, but we get asked lots of questions, and the best advice is just eat more vegetables, right? You know,
it's
we're talking
boring,
about,
but it's true. And I think, you know, when I am asked a lot of these questions about health stars, it's also just really important to put into context that health stars is really about comparing similar packaged products, but a big chunk of our diet should be coming before we even get to looking at packaged products, like shopping around the perimeter of the supermarket and filling up your trolley with fresh fruit and veg and things. But look, a lot of healthy things still do come in packages, like, you know, plain dairy products, tinned vegetables that aren't full of extra salt and sugar. Like, they're really important, and they're especially important in areas where it's hard to get access to fresh foods sometimes. So we do need health stars, but they're never going to give us like our wholesale dietary advice. We still need to be able to kind of make our own shopping list and make a healthy shopping list. And then when we're picking between the things on the list, that's where it sort of comes into play.
Absolutely. And I know most parents wouldn't survive without frozen vegetables. The amount of times I've looked at it,
great.
Saved my life having frozen peas and broccoli in the freezer. Definitely. So does Australia do we have like best practice? You said about 30 different countries have a front of pack labeling sort of system. Where do we rank in terms of
I think we rank among the best. And I think, you know, our system's 6 years old now. And so when we developed it, I think it was at the cutting edge. But now there are ones that everyone learns from each country that does it. And so there are 2 different sort of approaches that I would consider the best in the world right now. One is what Australia has, these overall spectrums where we're ranking things overall from, in our case, half to 5 stars. And in Europe, you see a similar one going on right now. It's ranking foods from A to E or green to red overall. So there's sort of, that's what we call the spectrum ratings. And the benefit of those is that they can appear on all foods. So it can guide you towards healthy things, also steer you away from unhealthy things. The problem with them when they're voluntary is that we're mostly not seeing them on unhealthy things. So, you know, I did research in my PhD that showed that stars were on 42% of products, but most of the stars, 3/4 of all the stars, are on products that score 3 or above. And the problem is we really need Australians to eat less of the foods that score half the two.
Yeah.
And they're not seeing that information. So I don't think in the real world we've seen the full benefit of these spectrum ratings.
Yeah.
The other type of rating that's really like taking off worldwide that's quite exciting to public health advocates is these warning star labels. So you really see them in South America. Also, Israel and Canada's got one in the pipeline, which is instead of rating foods overall, we're just going to put warning signs on the front that say high in the harmful nutrients. So it says, if you bought a packet of Oreos in Chile, you would see high sugar, high fat, high energy, and it would be in a stop sign and it would say Ministry of Health on it. So it's very clear. There's a government message that this is not a healthy product. And the strength of those systems is in the fact that they're mandatory, which of course a warning label has to be mandatory because no company is going to voluntarily put that on. And also that they're linked to other policies like school food. You know, anything with a warning label can't be sold in a school, and also it can't be marketed to children.
Yeah.
So there's some reasons why those labels are really strong, and it's not just to do with the label design. So health stars would probably also be stronger, definitely be stronger if it was mandatory, and if it was linked to school foods, and if it was linked to marketing to kids. So you got to kind of separate out how the label works from all the other great policy features. And I think, you know, health stars is really not a bad label design, but we could make it a lot stronger if we did some of these, like made it mandatory and made it linked to other policies.
Yeah, absolutely. A more holistic approach to food.
Yeah, like the power of food labeling doesn't really just come from what the consumer sees on the pack. And one big thing where food labeling works is what it makes companies do as well. So if health stars was mandatory, then it would be likely that more companies would improve their products to get a higher star rating. And that would also be really beneficial for everyone because it means that even if you don't bother to read the star, you're going to get a healthier product. It's going to probably have less salt and sugar in it, say. So that's one of the things, other reasons why we argue for mandatory labeling. Yeah.
Well, we saw that was their research came out, was it this week, last week, about the UK and their sugar tax, and about how although sales, the volume is about the same, the amount of sugar that has been consumed by those products is less because of the way they've done the tax there.
Yeah, and they're really targeting a change to manufacturer behavior, which, you know, I think it's good. It takes the pressure off consumers who are already, you know, rather than us having to make hundreds of thousands of healthy decisions each year, you just shift some of the food supply to take some of the worst things out, and then, you know, people can go about their daily shopping and just buy better products.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's one of the things that kind of we live and breathe at parents' voice, and it happens. I mean, there's a lot of kind of parent shaming around the food that your kids eat, and actually where's the responsibility from the companies that are manufacturing and then selling these products and aiming them at children, you know?
Yeah, and I would say, you know, one example that made me quite angry during the Health Star kind of review when I was looking at products was that Kellogg's have really put this on all of their breakfast cereals where they do quite well. But for a long time, and unless they've done it recently, they never put it on all their LCMs, for example, that score really low. And I think that's information that parents want. That's products they buy and put in their kids' lunchboxes all the time. And they're hiding from the fact that they get half or 1 star there.
Absolutely. And when I last looked at this, and I haven't updated my knowledge since kind of the end of last year, but when I last looked at it, the ones that actually looked like they're potentially healthier in that kind of LCM's product range, the ones that say they have yogurt, actually scored the worst from a health star rating perspective, because of the saturated fat in that kind of fake yogurt product that was put on them, and the sugar. So parents kind of, you're looking at it, go, I'll get LCMs, but, you know, I'll try and get the healthier one. Actually, unless you're standing there looking at all the back of the packets, you're not going to be able to differentiate there. And also you lack that understanding then that potentially getting LCMs at all is a bad choice because they haven't put the health star rating system on the front of those packets.
Yeah, hopefully we get to a point where there's enough health stars on products where we can say to people that no stars should equal no trust.
Yeah.
Because it'll be the ones that are last to put it on that have got the most to hide. But right now we're only at about 50%, so I don't you can't really take too much away from that. And you know, small companies, they're probably not going to go first, and I wouldn't want to punish small companies for not, especially while they're waiting for the outcome of the review. But in the next few years, hopefully we get to a kind of point of saturation. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, yeah, categories like that kind of muesli bars sort of space is one that we definitely need to see more stars being put on those packages.
Mm. And yeah, because there's a big range of products there. It's very hard to tell when something goes from, you know, just a few oats stuck together with some nuts or something to, yeah, really, really processed, like sugar glued together with marshmallow. There's a big range in that category.
Oh, there really is.
Mm.
There really is. I'm thinking back to my own time as a child and begging for fruit roll-ups, but we all, parents, we have our own challenges with our kids, and then even people without kids remember those times when they're begged their parents for certain things in the lunchbox. It's definitely a pressure point for parents, and having proper information assists there. So would you say, you've spoken a few times about making the system mandatory. Do you think that that's the key improvement that we need in our system?
Yeah, it is, and I say that from a pretty considered perspective, because at the George where I work, we've got a database of the whole food supply, and we can calculate what every product gets, even where they're not showing it on the pack.
Mm.
And we think, you know, we've looked at how every product scores, and I think overall Health Stars would do pretty well in most cases. So we think it's really important that it would be on everything, and we think that would also improve consumer trust, because they would see, oh wait, there's all these products that score badly, therefore I can trust this thing more. Whereas when it's been voluntary, it's mostly been used as a marketing tool by companies and not really used for its full like public health benefit. So
Yeah.
that's definitely an ask, and I think it's really important that that ask comes from consumers as well. So if you're listening today and you have a chance to, you know, talk to anyone about this, it's like making it mandatory would definitely, it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did mean to say earlier that if you had any questions, to type them in the Facebook comments, and we can answer them at the end, which we're almost there at the end. And so I was like just thinking about like that improvement. Have we seen much reformulation occur yet? Like, it's not mandatory yet, but were there some products that changed before they put the stars on or something like that? Like, has it prompted much reformulation?
It's hard to say, but yes, yes. So we've done studies overall in the food supply, and there've been small amounts of reformulation, like small cuts to salt. It is true that Nutrigrain. So Nutrigrain should probably be, I think, maybe a 2 or 2.5 star food, but they cut just enough salt and sugar to get to this tipping point where they could then claim their protein points. And they did that before Health Stars came in, and that was, I would say, a deliberate move from them. And you know, they did cut the sugar in the product. So you could say that's a win. I just don't think they should be entitled to so many protein points. I think they probably should have gone from like 2 to 2.5, not 2 to 4. And so, but they definitely said that Health Stars was an incentive for them to do that. So the main thing is that if it's voluntary, that's not such a big incentive, because you can still just hide behind not showing.
Yeah.
That's another reason why a mandatory Health Star is a different prospect.
So we have a question. So there's no doubt that making the system mandatory would make it more useful for consumers, but is there a risk that with the knock-on effect of product reformulation, that in some categories producers can game the system? So basically that point you just made, Ali, about, you know, like the loopholes. I mean, with the review, are some of those loopholes closed a little bit? How are we faring?
So the review was like, the review did deliver important changes and close some of those loopholes, like the Milo loophole. I think manufacturers will always be sort of one step ahead in how they can use it. But I I still believe that overall, like, we shouldn't be preoccupied with some of these outlier products. I think, don't forget that you can trust it in most cases and it is useful. So, and the good thing is that people know those products are outliers. Like, they know there's something wrong there mostly. So I would say, if you know a product isn't great, but it's somehow managed to get this high score, like, trust your gut as well. You don't have to throw out what you already know and suddenly believe the health stuff. But Health Star still overall is going to give you useful information. And I look at it, say, on pasta sauces or different savory sauces and things. Sometimes you look at them and you think, why is that so low? And you look at it and you're like, well, it's actually got a lot of sugar in a savory sauce. Like, so there's sometimes it really is a signal on products you weren't expecting, or flavored yogurts and things like that you thought were healthy and that are not. And that's where it's actually really useful.
Yeah. So another question. So in terms of the review of the health star rating system, do you think there'll be another review following the review of the Australian Dietary Guidelines?
Yes, they've said in some of the outcomes of the current review that they are going to go, they said, well, we'll go a bit harsher on salt and sugar, and we'll look at this again after the update to the Australian Dietary Guidelines. So they've flagged it. It's never a given. I'm sure we have to keep up pressure asking for it.
Yeah.
And also the Dietary Guidelines process, as much as I hate to say it, is going to be slow. So I wouldn't be, holding my breath for it. And I also think it's a bit silly that they've said, we'll consider salt and sugar again after the dietary guidelines review, because the dietary guidelines are not going to get more lenient on salt and sugar. They're only going to get harsher. So I'm not sure why I don't know. It was a bit of an excuse, I think, but they've said they're going to look at it. And I think some areas where it might be useful is if the dietary guidelines figure out, if they say more about degree of processing of food, which is an area where, the evidence is evolving. If they really look at things like fruit juices and other sort of fruit paste, and this movement that we've really seen because people are more aware about normal sugars and we see companies putting these other forms of sugar in things. If the guidelines come out and say strong things on that, it will help us to get a better health star down the track.
Excellent. I've got a few here, but our Evie, who's monitoring the comments section, tells me there's a lot of interest in a question around the juice, which we probably, I did mean to cover a little bit more in this thing, but so the juice companies were outraged that their products now have a lower health star rating than Diet Cola, which is one of the, Ali and I talked about this before we came live, but that many consumers find this confusing. So how do we explain this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think that the juice manufacturers it was a really smart move when they had this media campaign around the Diet Coke, comparing themselves to Diet Coke. I think, so what we've done in the drinks category, it's a hard category to score because there's not a lot in those products. It's just sugar and water. You don't really have all the other like fat and salt in the other products to give an overall score that balance things out. So what they've gone for is I think the important thing for consumers is the only product now that can get 5 is plain water. And that's very consistent with dietary guidelines and the message we want to send. And then you can get 4.5 if you're like a flavored water, like a mineral water with a dash of lemon. And that was also a problem before. They used to get 1.5, which seemed wrong. So they've gone up. That's good. The plain water is really getting high scores. And then from 4 downwards, you will get scored based on your sugar content, basically. And so if you're a juice that's really high in sugar, you could get as low as 2 or 2.5. If you're a good juice, you could still get 4. They didn't really talk about that in the media, the juice companies, but we've looked at how all juices would score, and plenty of them would still get 4. And then diet drinks, they don't have anything in them that's in the algorithm, really. They're like water-like with these sweeteners. And what I'd say about the sweeteners is there's not enough evidence yet about long-term use of lots of sweeteners. We know that they're safe to eat now. They're not going to make you sick overnight. And there's been a lot of studies on that, and they are safe. But we've also never had so many of them in so many products. And so I think consumers are cynical, and some scientists are looking at, what are the long-term impacts of having so many artificial sweeteners in our lives. So we don't generally recommend people who don't drink those products to start drinking them. But now in the new system that they will get about 3.5. And I think that's right, because the full sugar ones will get 1 or half. And the message we're sending there is it's better to choose a diet drink than it is to drink a full sugar drink. But the best message is definitely still water. Like, it's still clearly the winner. And, the juice companies never said anything about that. But
No, they didn't. And I think that we did a post at the time and comparing the juice to the orange,
yeah.
That's one of the reasons why they used to get such a high score, because they were just the fruit, and fruit scored so well, so it's actually balancing out that.
Yeah, and I think it was a really great chance to talk in the media about actually juice isn't as healthy as people think it is. So when you take an orange and you juice it and you strip out all the fiber and you we kind of talk about breaking the cell wall of where the sugar is contained. And so then you're just getting liquid sugar, basically. Like, normal sugar is just cane juice. And so it's, once you do that, and also when you drink it, like an orange juice could have 8 orange, the sugar from 8 oranges in it. And so it's really different than eating whole fruit. And the dietary guidelines are really clear to eat whole fruit. And they have this limited exception around a small serve of fruit juice sometimes, when you can't get access to frozen, like it's so many caveats, but that's not how juice is marketed. It's marketed as healthy every day, and people spending a lot of money on it as well, which is, I think, one reason why they get annoyed when they find out it's not healthy. But I'm glad we're having that discussion, I think. Now.
Absolutely. And then we're going to just do one final question. So Melissa is asking about the Food Switch app and whether this could be promoted more to help customers make choices when the Health Star rating system is not on the product.
That's a great plug for a George Institute initiative. So I earn nothing from this. Food Switch is free, but you can definitely download Food Switch. And the aim that we're going for there is that people can, we have all this data, so people can scan a product barcode and they'll be shown the health star of that product, even if it's not on the package. And it will also recommend healthier products in that category. So it will recommend, a similar chocolate biscuit or a similar breakfast cereal. It won't just tell you to eat a carrot when you're trying to scan a cereal. It's free. Anyone can download it. We're currently in the process of trying to put in this new algorithm, so the updated algorithm, and figure out when we'll start showing people the new stars, because we don't want to confuse them from what's on the shelf. But I think, I recommend it because I work for the George, but I think it's really useful, and it's free. So give it a try.
I can tell you, like, as a person who uses the app, it's very handy. And I think that point about how it suggests a healthier version of the thing you're scanning, and that it is it's not just like, it's quite almost, it seems really defined in that category, like it's another chocolate biscuit. It's not even just, oh no, you should have that other biscuit. It's kind of what's something similar that is better for you.
Yeah, we're always trying to improve it further. So one issue definitely has been scanning things, and then the food supply changes so rapidly, so it's quite common you could scan a new product and we don't have it yet. If you do that, we ask you to send us photos and we add it to the database. But we're also always trying to clear out old products and make sure that when you're shopping you can see things. I think the other good thing about it is you can use it once with products you buy commonly and just switch that product. I switched the brand of yogurt that I buy after I used it, and that was a once off, and I'm still buying that yogurt now. Yeah. So it's not every shop that you have to spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah, definitely. So does the George have any plans to do like a mass marketing campaign of your Food Switch app?
Every few years we push it out for different things. It's just being used by quite a lot of people in the background. We don't, I'd love to run a campaign, but we don't have. What we're actually working on is, over time, how we can score products based not only on healthiness, but also environmental sustainability. So that's where we've started to put some energy in how you would rate foods based on the greenhouse gas emissions and water use and different things. So there's a lot of scientists thinking about that. But for now, it's good on nutritional quality. And we're also trying to do things like, what would happen if you put added sugar into it? And we're going to start releasing that information to consumers. So we'll do that. And part of it's to give consumers information, and a big part of it is to create pressure on companies to give that information on the pack.
Yeah. And that's like one final point on the app before we move on, is that it doesn't just do health star rating, but also you could you can select like salt, or like you can select a particular nutrient that you need to avoid in your diet. And it kind of tailors the suggestions then when you scan a product, which is useful if you've got like, if you're trying to particularly sodium, I think is one of those ones from a
if you had high blood pressure, then the sodium filter. There's also like a gluten filter for people who are looking to shop gluten-free. So yeah,
it does everything. Does everything.
Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, no problems. It was a genuine question. The people on Facebook can verify. So we're kind of going to wrap it up there. We've got 7 minutes over. And as Ali mentioned, you know, you can tell your local MP that we want it mandatory, but you can also make sure you're subscribed to the Parents' Voice email list, because periodically we send stuff out asking parents' opinion as we're preparing our submissions into all of these sorts of consultations. And we also attend things in person to present the opinions of parents and thoughts in this space, which is, I think, is really valuable, particularly as we connect it with people like you, Ali, and the research that you guys are doing. Make sure we're all kind of singing from the same song sheet. And there really is a power in the kind of collective voice and movement of parents in that space. It's quite valued. So, you know, subscribe to our email list, or make sure you're following us on social media, and we'll keep you in the loop when we're running campaigns on this. And Ali's also prolific on Twitter, so feel free to jump over there and follow her and keep up to date with all the latest research in this space. So thank you so much for joining us, Ali. It's been a great conversation, and we'll say goodbye to everyone now. See you, everyone.
Thanks.